everyone, and thank you so much for coming to another episode of Fireside Chats. I'm your host, Shruti Kapoor, and in these Fireside Chats, I bring inspirational people from the community who share not only their successes but also their struggles. The reason I started these fireside chats is because I felt like whenever I would go through a struggle myself, I would feel like an imposter and I would feel like I'm the only one facing this way, feeling this way, and everybody else is doing great. I would see people like doing awesome on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and I was like, is it just me? And then when I would talk to people behind the scenes, they would tell me that they felt the same way that I was feeling. And I was like, I need to create a platform where everybody else can feel and hear these stories and understand that they are not alone. And there's everybody who has kind of experienced the same sort of struggles and ups and downs in their career like we have. And we're not just an imposter, we're just somebody who hasn't talked to anybody else before. So these are the reasons why I created this fireside chat. In this episode, I have an amazing guest with me today. This is somebody who has lifted everybody in the community, and she's the reason why I am a speaker today. She was the one who gave me a chance very first time at a random meetup that I was just attending, and she messaged out to me and said, "Hey Shruti, would you be willing to do a talk?" And I had never done a talk at this point before, and I was like, I want to do a talk at some point, but I don't know if I'm ready. But okay, fine, I'll just do it. And she was willing to put in that faith in me, and because of her, I am here today. I am so excited to welcome my guest, Tracy Lee, to Fireside Chats with Shruti Kapoor. Hello, Tracy.
Hi, how's it going? Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so happy we did it.
Same.
So I introduced you,
Mhm.
but do you want to give a quick introduction of yourself?
Sure. My name's Tracy. I'm the CEO of a company called This.Labs. I'm also a Google developer expert on the ArcGIS core team, Microsoft MVP, GitHub star, and I just love building community.
Oh, that's such a beautiful introduction. GitHub, Microsoft, Google, everything. You're like awesome, and you've done everything. I want to know, how did you get started into tech?
Well, I got started into tech because I had a boyfriend, and
As we all do.
yes, at that time, and this was back, I think, this is probably like 10 years ago, something like that. Oh gosh, very long time ago. Jeez. Um, but anyway, so he had just moved to the Silicon Valley,
Oh,
and I was in love, and he said, "We need friends," and I said, "Okay, what kind of friends?" And he said, he like really liked tech.
huh,
JavaScript. He
huh.
really liked JavaScript. And so I started building community around JavaScript because he
Oh,
wanted friends and he wanted a community,
oh,
you
and
know.
you were not in tech at the time.
No, I was doing tech startups. So my
Mm.
my last company, Dishcrawl, was just being acquired. So I was kind of going through that as I was meeting him. And yeah, that was like my entire life, doing dish crawl. So I was more in tech startups, but I
Mm.
was never a developer. I
Mm.
was on the business side of things.
Right.
Hmm.
Okay. So you met this guy and he said, I want to make a community. I want to make friends. And you were like, let me create this community for you. So you like
Yes.
enabled him to make friends.
Yes.
And how did that kind of turn into you becoming a tech person yourself?
Well, once I once we made friends, I was just surrounded by all tech people
Huh.
all the time.
People
Like
who
my
spoke code.
entire life was basically hanging out with core team members of different technologies.
Hmm.
Like that was my entire life.
Right.
Okay. And so I said, well, oh, and I was organizing a really big JavaScript meetup called Modern Web,
Oh, yeah.
which is where you first spoke.
Yes.
And
Special memories.
I know, right? And while we were doing that, I just, I said, well, I should probably learn JavaScript. So I did.
Okay. And so you went to a boot camp, if I remember
Yes,
correctly.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I decided to take, it was a 3-week boot camp. It was
Mm.
online, and I just put everything to the side and said, okay, I'm going to sit down and dedicate my time to this
Hmm.
and not be distracted. So
Hmm.
I did that for 3 weeks online, and that is how I got into JavaScript.
So, this was an online boot camp. What
Hmm.
was your kind of experience through it? Did you feel like you got the best out of it, or did you feel like it was something that, like, you still had to do something after it to kind of
Yeah.
prepare yourself for the real world, for the job world?
I don't really know what I was doing. Like, I think, you know, my last company was just being acquired, right?
Hmm.
So I was a little bit burnt out
Right.
and tired.
Hmm.
And, you know, I guess I didn't really have to work. I was just tired. You
Hmm.
know, startup can really
Yeah.
startup
Can
can
burn
really
you
burn
out.
you out. Yeah. So I just figured I should learn it.
Hmm. Yeah.
But then, I remember, there's many ways to learn development, right? And at that time, right, this was like right before ES 2015 came out. So
Oh,
I think it was like 2014-ish time frame.
I don't know. 2015. Yeah.
2014, 2015,
Yeah.
like something like that.
Right.
And I was learning JavaScript. I was so excited. Finding the marquee tag was like the best thing that had ever happened
Me
to
too.
me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I found it, I was like, yeah, I can build
I
cool stuff. I can make
know.
things move on the screen.
I
It's so
know.
cool.
And
Yeah.
like the blink tag was
Yeah.
pretty amazing too. I was very excited about that.
Yeah.
So just being able to see those little things, and then my boyfriend at the time, he like looked at me one day. He was like, "I really shouldn't do this." But then he did. He introduced me to a framework.
Oh.
Like I think a week into my coding,
Oh.
he introduced me to Ember,
Oh, wow.
and I was like, this is the best thing in the entire world. I can build anything I want, because all of a sudden, like I have material design.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, I have components.
Yeah.
Everything is just built in for me.
It's like a big tool set.
I know. And so I spent all weekend building websites, and it was the best thing ever. And I was so empowered by that.
Yeah.
And then, then I just never looked back.
Oh. So
Yeah.
I think that's like a very successful way of kind of approaching boot camp.
Mhm.
Like you learn something at school in the boot
Mhm.
camp, and then
Mhm.
you like go home and you build
Yes.
more
Yes.
websites and you learn new
You
framework.
have to.
You have to, right?
Yeah.
So I know there's a lot of people who watch this Fireside
Mhm.
Chats who are also coming out of boot camps.
Right.
What kind of advice would you give them for like looking for jobs or making the most out of
Yes.
their boot camp experience?
You cannot. Like, there were so many people in my boot camp class that I could tell were half paying attention online,
Mhm.
right? Because,
Right.
you're all part of this call. So maybe there's like 10, 20 people on this call or something. And, you have this instructor talking, and you can just tell that people are probably doing other things, right? Because it's
Hmm.
not video.
Hmm.
And you have to be paying attention. You have to be asking questions. You have to be engaged. Like, so I was probably one of the most engaged people during that boot camp. And then afterwards, so this was like a 9 to 5 type boot camp.
Hmm.
But then afterwards, I said, "Ooh, this is what I learned today. Let me build stuff with it."
Hmm.
And then I learned how to build with it. And I committed everything to GitHub.
Hmm.
And then I was like, "Ooh, let me make like a little website thing that just posts, every single day what I'm learning."
Hmm.
It's still on my GitHub probably.
Oh.
But it's like day 1 I did this, day 2 I did this, day 3 I learned, CSS or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I just kept building what I learned and incorporating it into it just to practice my skill set.
Right.
And so that really helped me excel,
Hmm.
and then, I was fortunate enough to already be part of the JavaScript community.
Right.
And so, again, at the time, ES 2015 was coming out, and I was like asking my teacher, like, what about ES 2015? And, he had no idea what it was.
Hmm.
And so that was unfortunate. But I think, unfortunately, from a community perspective, from a standards perspective, and everything that was going on with ES 2015 and new technologies, new standards that were coming out, I did know more than my teacher.
Hmm.
So they
That's
ended up giving
awesome.
me a refund.
Oh, there you go.
I did get a lot out of it, but like at the same time, right? Like you're having not a senior developer teach you JavaScript. So
Yeah.
was that really
That's
worth
kind of
paying?
unfortunate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So, but you do just have to make the most out of it
Hmm.
and teach and learn. I mean, I've seen so many people. I can't remember her name, but there's other people like Ellie Zub. Do you know Ellie? Ellie Zub on Twitter. Anyway, she's like just learning,
Hmm.
getting online, and building her own community
Hmm.
and trying to get a job. And like, I went to Render, and everybody kind of knew her. She was like already part of the community, and that was really cool to watch. So,
Yeah.
do you know Jason Torres? You
Yeah.
know, you've seen him on Twitter, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think he's hasn't gotten his first tech job either.
Oh.
But like you would think Jason's
Yeah.
like, I don't know, you just know
He's
Jason.
everywhere.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so he's doing an excellent job as well at like trying to figure out how to get a job.
Yeah, so like for people who probably don't know these people,
Mm-hmm.
some of the things that we've noticed about these folks is like they're sharing what they're learning.
Right.
They're very open and vocal on Twitter and LinkedIn and like all of these places where you would find employers, where you would see like people looking for people who are looking for work.
Yes.
And they're there, like they're sharing what they're learning. They're talking about the events that they're going to. They're reaching out to people. They're networking. They're like telling them that they're looking for jobs. So they're like very open and out there. And I think that's a really great thing for anybody who's looking for a job.
Yes.
Whether you've like graduated from a boot camp or a CS degree, or you're just like learning from like free code camp, whatever it is, right?
I mean, you know, Aiden is at this conference that we're both at right now. So Aiden Bai, do you know him? So he's the creator of Million JF.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. You know, he was in high school and he was just out there learning stuff, building community, doing open source, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And, you know, ended up graduating high school, got accepted into college, but then got accepted into YC a few months after college, dropped out of college, and now is doing, you know, Million JS full time. Yeah, I'm building a company around it.
Oh yeah.
But like, and you know, he just raised like over $2 million.
Wow.
So it's funny because you know that's from what are we, I think it's like, is it July? Is it June? Is it June? It's June. Yeah. So I mean, you know, that's like one semester.
Yeah.
From like starting in September school to dropping out to, hey, I raised $2.5 million for my startup.
That is so like such a cool like story, because people would not think that just getting out of school you would get something like this, or even like dropping out of school you would have this kind of like success.
Right.
But I guess the moral of the story is that if you share and you're like out there and you're like putting in your time and effort, so anything will happen for you.
Absolutely.
And so you got into tech this way, and now you're running a company, This Dot. So tell us about This Dot.
Yeah, This Dot. I started it originally because I just loved building community. I've always been about bringing people together. That's definitely one of my strengths and one of my passions.
Yeah.
And so initially I started This Dot because it was a way to fund the things that I love to do. So, you know, I had more technical partners, of course, and we were all open source contributors of different technologies and frameworks. And yeah, just decided to, you know, I mean, I took a break for a year and I decided to just chill out. I told myself I would never do startup again because it was so
draining.
Yeah, it was so draining. I was so burnt out from my first startup. But after a year, I was like, all right, let's do something useful. And so then I just decided to start
This Dot.
Yeah, just start This Dot. And you know, we've been incredibly successful. You know, we've been so lucky to have worked on so many amazing projects, like being able to work with different Google teams. So like Google AMP, we worked with them on the documentation, a lot of the trainings that you have online as well. With React, you know, helping React with, you know, being a part of that story and helping them with the new React documentation.
Yeah.
You know, working with the Angular team over at Google and building out Angular demo apps for their Google I/O demos with TensorFlow was really fun. Work with a lot of innovation teams as well, with like Sentry, Cloudinary, Twilio, etc. Just like names that we all love and know. It's been really cool to be able to build and collaborate with those types of folks. Yeah. But then we also work with people like Bill.com and Stripe, and you know, on the life sciences side, like we've worked with like Moderna, Novartis, Roche, those types of folks. And the reason why I'm so passionate about those other verticals is because, you know, in high tech, we see so much and we're so fortunate to just be at the forefront of technology, right? Like just talking about stuff that nobody knows even exists yet.
Right.
And, you know, the speed as to which innovation moves for us is not like other industries. And so being able to bring those best practices to other industries, being able to show those other industries what development should actually look like, what an engineering team should look like, what the velocity should look like
Yeah.
is pretty amazing because, I've always been, and the team at this dot is all about like making the world a better place. And so we're able to do that. And, that's just being a software consultancy, right? Just building products for people.
Yeah. So I think, how long have you been at like how long have you had this start for?
8 years.
Wow, it's a long time.
So long.
It's very successful startup, right? Like the names that you've dropped, and I've also seen like React Devs also has this dot, and we were also using this dot for PayPal as well. So I think your company is something that is embedded in a lot of different companies as like workflow as like a development partner. I'm curious, how did you get to this stage, and how did you kind of, I think you already had like a very strong community, so that really helps you.
Yeah.
But how did you kind of bring your company from infancy to something that is like incorporated by all of these big tech companies?
Right. I guess it was community. I mean, it's really been my network and talking to people and collaborating and really just bringing opportunities to like just being around, I suppose, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, but I guess we never think about like I've never thought about being a part of the community as a way to like grow the company.
Right.
But I think, I don't know, we're all curious about what we do and if we can help each other, that's the amazing thing, So
Yeah.
I think it's really that.
Yeah.
I think in the other industries it's a little bit different. Like I really like to help people. So I always I have to like I really enjoy helping people and yeah, like building community and helping people, I guess are like my two things. And so in the other industries and in startups, we work with a lot of startups as well. It's you just really see the opportunity to help people, right? Because again, what we understand from an engineering perspective and high tech is so different than what others do.
Yeah.
So like you want to make those people successful. You want to teach them because it's a little bit painful for you to see somebody, they don't know they're struggling, but they're struggling.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm gonna take a quick break just to check if it is actually recording. It looks like it is. We've been live for 17 minutes. Perfect. Okay. I'm gonna delve into community a little bit.
Okay.
And then we'll maybe talk about like one struggle.
Yep.
I don't know if we talked about like this dot struggle. I'm like blanking right now. Or if
I
we
didn't
talked
talk about the struggle, but I can talk about like the struggle of like not having, like not having food or like that type of stuff and
Yeah.
like that type of struggle.
And this was during the start, or this was before?
This was way before.
Okay,
This is when I was like 21.
I'm trying to think like how am I gonna frame the story into a question. I think this was this like while you were learning boot camp and
No, this was like when I was young.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit
Oh,
around that story.
maybe you can talk about like have you had any struggles in your life that have shaped how you think today?
Yeah, okay, cool. I'll ask that. And then I think because we were talking about community and how it is so important, I'll ask you about how you built the community, how somebody who's doing their community or building their community can take tips, and what are some tips you can offer. And then I'll talk about like, is there any struggle you would like to share?
Okay.
And then we'll wrap it up.
Okay.
Sounds good? Cool. Okay. All right. So you mentioned like community was a big part of success, of the reason this start was so successful. So tell us a little bit about how you became this person who's always empowering community. I think that's one thing that I always remember about you. You're like the professional door opener for people. You opened the door for me, but also for anybody else. Like if they talk about you, they'll always talk about how you kind of like open an opportunity for them. And I think people see you as this person who opens doors and like opens opportunities, hypes them up. Tell me a little bit about like how you grow your community, and for somebody who's looking to be somebody like you, like somebody who can help other people grow a community, build a community. What are some tips they can take?
I think it's just listening. And so, I think there's a lot of things. Like, for example, I didn't really realize I was good at leadership until I was in college. And then I was like, because I had a really rocky childhood, right? And I had a really like traumatic early 20s relationships, right? So, when you're going through all of that struggle, you don't think about who you are as a person. You're
Hmm.
worried about everything else around
Yeah.
you. And so it wasn't until college where I was like sitting in this college class, actually all my college classes, and like for some reason, all of a sudden all the pretty girls started sitting around me.
Hmm.
And I was like, this is weird. This has never happened before. And then like for some reason, I always became the organizer of
Oh.
all the classes.
Yeah.
And I was always like, we are always the best in the class, right? If it was part of my group. So for some reason, I just like, I don't know, sometimes it just happens.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same thing when I went to this party that, I don't know. I think I was going through a breakup and I was really depressed or something. And I went to this party and I sat by this girl and I didn't really care about, I was kind of like depressed. But then she started talking about cookies.
Huh.
And then she started talking about cheesecakes. And then she started talking about and then we're just talking about cheesecake flavors. And then she was talking about how she wanted to, like, she always wanted to start like a bakery. And I
Oh.
was like, well, why don't you?
Yeah.
And then, she's like, oh, well, because, I don't know where to, make it. And it's like, oh, well, there's these kitchens that you can rent out. And she's like, oh, yeah, but like that would be so expensive. I was like, no, they're actually really not that expensive. They're probably about $300 a month or something like that. She's like, oh, well, this, so we just kind of like talk through all of it.
Yeah.
And then, then a few months later, she started a bakery.
Ah.
So it's like that type of stuff, right? Like
Yeah.
just, I think talking to people
Talking
and
through.
getting excited about what people do is really important.
Yeah.
And that really is the foundation for building any community,
Right.
right? Like you have to like people.
Yeah.
I mean, I think when it comes to community as well, you might think you want to build into a community or be a part of a community,
Yeah.
but the trick is also choosing what type of community you want to be a part of.
Oh yeah.
Because if you don't like those people,
Yeah.
then
You're not genuine.
yeah, and you're not excited about
Yeah.
it, right? So
Yeah.
I don't mean to put you on the spot, but can you think of any community where you're like technology community where you're like part of that community?
Yeah.
Like I don't not like those people, but I don't see myself hanging out with those people every day.
Yeah.
Do you have
Yeah.
any?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to name them, but I can think of them. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and you like
Same.
slowly distant from them, right? You're
Right.
like, I like you from a distance, but I don't want to hang out with you every day. You know?
Yeah.
I don't want to be
Yeah.
associated with this group,
Right.
right? It's
Right.
okay like once in a year, whatever, at an event or something, but
Right.
you're not my group of people,
Yeah.
right?
But I think once you find the people you really want to hang out with and
Yeah.
you care about them and you are excited about hanging out with them generally, I think community is really about who you choose to be in that community as well. So
Yeah.
as community members, even if you're not an organizer of a community, you as a community member bring yourself
Yeah.
to a community and you have the ability to shape that community
Yeah.
because of the other people you introduce into that community, right?
Right.
So you don't have to ask for permission to be a part of a community and bring a community. I think it just like should naturally happen.
Yeah.
Like Ken Wheeler brought Ken Wheeler to React and now there's like a Ken Wheeler, there's Ken Wheeler and then there's like an association of Ken Wheeler affiliates
Yeah.
who we could name,
Right.
but like he brought that to the React
Right.
community. We didn't have that before.
Yeah. Yeah. It's also like people being genuinely themselves and like attracting that kind of people around them. And I think being genuine is so important in raising a community, building a community as well, because you can only fake being interested in people's stuff for so long. People figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think building a community is so important, and I think I've seen you done a great job at it. You like
Thank you.
always hype people up. You're always the positive spirit. You're always there to like help people reach the next thing that they're wanting to reach. You have such a big network, and you're always open to like help people within that network to kind of like reach each other instead of
Yeah.
kind of like holding it back from each
Yes,
other,
yes.
which I think is such an amazing thing for somebody who's building a community.
Yeah.
And I think thanks to that, this start is so successful because it's like in every company's like,
Yeah.
portfolio now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been fun. I mean, I don't I guess like I'm not really one to like sit and brag about what we do, but it is really cool. Like lately people have been like, dude, you guys have worked with so many amazing companies.
Yeah, you have.
And I'm like, wow, we actually really have. That's
Yeah.
actually really impressive.
Yeah.
But I don't think about it on a day-to-day basis, right?
Right. And that's the humility part of it.
Yeah. Humility. That's a good word.
That is so important as well.
Humility, yeah.
Yeah. You can't build a community if you're not humble.
Like, what's the opposite of ego? It's humility, right?
Ego, boastful,
Yes.
tooting your own horn all the time.
Yes, humility. That word has been missing from my vocabulary, so thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yes.
It's in my vocabulary all the time. I'm a big person on humility. What was I asking? Yes. Okay. So, something that I really want to ask you is if there's been a struggle that has shaped you or your career throughout your life, or something that has shaped you in the earlier parts of your life, like early years of our career or life.
Yeah, when I was 21, I had just turned 21, I remember, because I had a very depressing 21-year-old birthday.
Oh no.
Yeah, I had just left home, and well, I was in love, but I ended up dating a guy who wasn't good for me. So I was in an incredibly abusive relationship. And so
shit.
I know, right? And so in that abusive relationship, you know, one of the telltale signs of an abusive relationship where it starts is taking your autonomy away from you. And so he took my financial freedom away from me. Right? Like I was running I was working full time at a gym. I was modeling full time, you know, so making
modeling.
I was making a lot of money off of that.
Damn.
I had a jewelry business, so I was making money off of that, right? I was doing all these things.
You're so cool.
But then, you know, he kind of told me like, I don't want you to do this. I don't want you to do that. I don't want you to do that anymore. And so, you know, he wanted me to like kind of stay at home and be a housewife, right? I know. And I was like,
put a ring on it.
Yeah, right. But anyways, what ended up happening though, because he was, you know, kind of like financially irresponsible. So a lot of times it was so stressful. We were left with, you know, I was like, what? You can't just not show up to work. But he would just not show up to work, and we would have $20 for the entire week to feed ourselves.
Wow.
And it's like, when you're put in that situation, what do?
Yeah.
You know, do you starve? So we never starved, but like $20 for a week, and having to try to figure out how on earth to make that work.
Yeah.
And so we did live, so for those times we lived on a lot of Colombo bread, eggs, and tomatoes. That was like the staple.
I was gonna ask, like, what can you buy in $20?
Yeah, that was what you could buy.
Oh god. At least you had some protein.
Yeah. And you know, we kind of did that. But that really teaches you a lot. Oh my gosh, we had no money for gas. And so what we found out was that so the credit card, right, will obviously say declined.
Yeah.
But the credit card only authorizes when you start the gas pump. And so you just have to authorize it, and it'll do it even if you don't have money in your bank account. And it'll overdraft, right? But it'll let you fill up your thing if you have like at least $5 in your bank account. And so we would like do things like that.
Oh my god.
To like just get by.
That is so stressful.
I know, it's very stressful.
Like that.
I know, right? But it really taught me a lot from a resilience standpoint, and from a standpoint of, you know, like anything, you know, we're talking about tech.
Yeah.
We're talking about breaking into tech.
Yeah.
We're talking about, you know, a totally different like struggle.
Yeah.
It's not actually a struggle, if that makes sense, right? Like it's like we are already privileged.
Yeah.
We are already in a privileged place to even be able to be talking about this stuff. And so, and generally speaking, right, you think about work struggles and things like that, or generally like our life struggles. I mean, I hate it when people complain, because I'm just like, look, it's not that bad. Like, there are crazier things to complain about in life.
Yeah.
So that's really just taught me to, I guess that makes me feel like anything I really go through is not really that much of a struggle.
It puts things into perspective. Right?
Yeah, like I just don't really like, it's like, sure, I'm going through this, but like,
at least I have
so what?
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't matter, you know. I've
Yeah.
been through worse.
Right.
And I think that is something that's important to understand and put into perspective, that like we
Hmm.
are absolutely in privileged
Yeah.
situations, and like anything we feel like we're going through in our lives, like it's not that hard.
Yeah.
So if it's not that hard, that means that you can absolutely be successful in it.
Hmm.
So, you know, you you just have to create opportunities for yourself to be successful,
Hmm.
and give yourself no other option than to be
Then to
successful in
successful.
order to be successful.
Hmm.
Right? Because, you know, when I was put in that situation for food, I really had no other option
Yeah.
than to be successful.
Yeah.
So I was. But it's the same thing, right? Now, when I think about things and challenges in my life, and things that I really, really need to be successful at, I just give myself no other option
Hmm.
than to be successful,
Right.
and then I will get through it.
Oh, I love that perspective that you took from that. You know, like you have $20, you have to put food on the table. There is no other option. You cannot starve to death.
Mm-hmm.
And took that to like become resilient. And now if there's a struggle that comes in, you're like, I have to be successful. I was able to like put food on the table even when I
Mm-hmm.
had $20. And now I can do this because I was able to do that, you know. So
Yeah.
you like turn that around and like look where you are right now. You're like CEO of this big company who's working with all the high tech companies. It's so inspiring.
Yeah, yeah. And there's still more, right? There's still so much more I want to do to be successful. But it's really like, you know, I just love a good challenge, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I think so. We're almost at the end,
mm-hmm,
but before we leave, I
mm-hmm,
want to ask if there is any final advice you would give to somebody who's wanting to build a community,
mm-hmm,
start their own thing,
mm-hmm,
maybe like graduate out of a boot camp and look for their new
mm-hmm,
job.
mm-hmm. I would start listening to other people's stories.
Hmm.
I would like go on the internet and find people. I would get on Twitter. Like I still can't believe some people, you know, when I'm like, you need to get on Twitter.
Hmm.
And people who don't get on Twitter. Like I just don't understand.
Because the network of developers is huge on Twitter.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like this one guy was so funny because he was at a meetup. So he was at the Atlanta JS meetup, um, at Render, and he kept asking all these questions, and I was like, who is this guy that keeps asking all these questions, you know? And then he came up to me afterwards and was talking to me, and I was like, who is this guy? And I said, you need to get on Twitter. Are you on Twitter? And then I just added him to like the group chat for Render. And then like he just started showing up in room 404 and like networking with all the people. But he said at the end, he's like, that really made
Hmm.
my experience.
Right.
Because he found his community
Yeah.
through Twitter, through this group thread, through room 404, like through all these things.
Yeah.
And that's what happens when you get on Twitter. Just talk to people.
Right.
I mean, that's how
Send a message.
I mean, I built like 2 companies
Hmm.
just through Twitter.
Yeah.
That's it.
I
That's how I
found
built
you
my
through
first
Twitter.
company. Yeah.
Yeah.
I found my first co-founder through Twitter.
Hmm.
Rob, who's, you know, one of my favorite people who I work with at this dot,
Huh.
is you know, he found me through Twitter. So I mean, you know, Twitter is the best thing ever.
Yeah.
It's the best thing that's ever happened
I
to
think
me.
especially for like somebody who's trying to find their network or
Mhm.
community, or if you feel like you are not getting enough leads through LinkedIn,
Mhm.
Twitter is the place to be.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Any final words before we leave?
Just keep trying.
Keep trying.
Keep trying. I mean, it's not like life isn't that hard. It's just a challenge, right? Like, you know, you have every opportunity to take ownership of your own life and, you know, create the outcomes that you want.
Yeah. I love that. Keep
Mhm.
trying. When life gives you lemons, make lemonade.
Yes.
As cliche as it sounds, but it's so important to keep a positive attitude and just like keep striving.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I always do if I'm like going through something really hard is I'm like, well, I know that something great is coming.
Hmm.
So I just have to go through this because
Yeah.
that's life.
I love it.
And then some, you know, I know that something amazing, because life balances itself out.
Yeah.
Right? So there's going to be something amazing.
Yeah.
But you also have to think that way and attract that type of energy you can't be like, oh my gosh, my life is down and everything is horrible and something else bad is going to happen.
Yeah.
You've got to know that there's something on the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. Tracy, it's been so inspirational talking to you. I think you're just like so inspirational and positive, and it was such a nice conversation listening to like the real side of being a tech founder, somebody who's come out of boot camp but now has like a startup, successful startup. Thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Yeah,
It was so
thank you for having
amazing.
me.
Bye, Tracy. Bye,
Bye.
everyone.